probably didn't bring him up because I traded him early in the season, and it's wishful thinking that he doesn't perform at a top 5 second base level.
I see. Fair enough.
That's half tongue in cheek, half for real, by the way. All right. So our next segment is our personal top 5 minor league starting pitchers. I'm super excited about this segment and interested to hear what you have to say. Why don't we start at 5 for each of us, and then we'll just go one by one back and forth. Who's your number 5 minor league starting pitcher? This is for fantasy, not for MLB, by the way.
Yeah. My number 5 is Taj Bradley.
Interesting. Why don't you share a little bit about Taj Bradley?
So he's 21. He's in AA. One of the most important aspects for me is he's a member of the Tampa Bay Rays organization. So he already has 2+ off-speed pitches, a good command, and he has, of course, a great fastball. But his curveball and his changeup both have potential 70 grades. So kind of what we talked about with Sandy, for me, pitch mix is something that I value quite a bit. And so again, the fact that he's on the Rays and he has that kind of pitch mix arsenal already with their ability to develop and bring those kinds of tools to the majors is something that would be really appealing to me.
My number 5 is Jackson Jobe. He is a 19-year-old starter in the Tigers organization. He was picked 3rd overall by the Tigers in 2020, I believe. 6'2", 190. I have his ETA as late 2024. 60 grade fastball with Pipeline and Fangraphs. 70 grade slider from Fangraphs. He's famous for he's got a slider in high school that had a over 3,000 spin rate. And he's continued to show that in the minor leagues. The other thing about that slider is while it's in low 80s currently, he has pretty pinpoint control with it. And so if you mix a mid-90s fastball and a 3,000 plus RPM slider or spin rate slider with control, it's a really good place to start. He's got a projectable delivery, and he plays in a pretty straightforward delivery in a projectable body, and he's playing in a huge home park down the road in Comerica. So to me, barring injury, his floor is a number 3 starter and his upside is an ace. He's currently in A-ball. So far, 17 1/3 innings, 15 hits, 9 walks, 22 strikeouts. Kind of what you would expect from a 19-year-old in A-ball, lacking a little bit of control, striking people out. But a pitcher that a lot of folks are really high on. I think as we see the pitchers above him graduate to the major leagues, he will eventually be the number 1 starting pitcher prospect in baseball, probably as early as this offseason.
Okay. So my number 4 is Grayson Rodriguez.
What about let me ask you on the negative. What about Rodriguez has him down at 4 for you when he's pretty much the consensus number 1 amongst folks that look at minor leaguers?
I think with that team, I don't know that for fantasy that he has the ceiling that he may have when he's looked at as an MLB, someone who can log 160, 180 innings or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm not confident that he's going to be like a fantasy ace. That the Orioles can bring that to fruition. I certainly know he has the pitches, but yeah, it's just I just don't have as much confidence. For me, I would be less excited to roster him in fantasy.
So this is an organization. This has as much of a reflection on the Orioles as anything else in your mind.
Yeah.
Interesting. I too am lower on Rodriguez than most others. I have him at 2. I think that he does have Fangraphs had his changeup as a potential 80 pitch. right? And that's, to me, that's a big deal. He has a legitimate 4-pitch mix. I've seen some of his starts in minor league ball, and his ability to get left-handers out with the changeup is again, I go back to that. It's just something that really differentiates good from great starters for me. Currently in AAA, he's 5-1 with a 2.32 ERA. He's thrown 50 innings. He struck out 76. The one thing about Baltimore that is a plus for me is that left and left center is playing so difficult for hitters right now that I think that in and of itself gives Grayson Rodriguez a little bit of a bump. I watched Julio hit a shot to left field last night that hit the top of the wall and would have been out. I didn't see how many parks it would have been out of, but it certainly would have been out of Camden Yards last year. But again, Rodriguez is my number 2. I debated him more at 3 or 4, as you did, in large part because of the Orioles, but I still think his stuff is so overwhelming. And he has such a great pitch mix that he may just be better than the Orioles making him bad, right? He may transcend their difficulties as an organization to develop pitching and just be that good, but we will see. I expect to see him up in the next
I think
month.
for fantasy, as team context matters a lot, and there are no can't miss pitching prospects. He's been, you look at his comps in terms of his size and his pitch mix and where he was, and similar guys along the way, like an Alex Reyes or a Forrest Whitley. These guys were thought of similarly as these guys that are can't miss, and they missed.
Right.
So, and you look at, I don't know. I just think that's part of it.
It is part of it. It's a lot of times it's what profile I think us as individual evaluators prefer, and then proximity. Sometimes too, for me, it's like he's not a pitcher that I don't, even watching him in AAA, I don't necessarily love watching him pitch. He's an interesting pitcher, but I don't love watching him pitch in the same way I do some of the others we'll talk about. But there's a point in time where everybody can't be wrong, right? And so I have to I want to give him a certain level of respect as far as who he's going to be. But if I had my choice, I think he's my number 2. If I had my choice, I would probably take the 3 others that I haven't talked about before him, just from a preferential standpoint.
Cool.
Who's your number 3?
Number 3 is Yuri Perez.
Mm-hmm. He's also my number 3, but I'll let you go ahead with the evaluation.
Well, I mean, we talked about him relatively recently. So he's a 19-year-old in AA.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I value about him are the fact that the Marlins have shown that they can develop pitching. His size, he's a bigger, longer limbed, longer levers. And I think that makes it easier to throw velocity when you have that kind of ability. He's not a small guy with max effort. So he's 6'8", 200 pounds. So again, 19-year-old in AA. He and Jordan Walker are the 2 youngest players in AA. So, and the Marlins do have intentions on keeping him on a pretty fast track. And I think, there's a chance he could be a phenom. So I'm also big on makeup and things like that. And from reading some things about him, he seems to check all those boxes. So I believe most of being great is wanting to be great. And so we'll see, but I'm excited about him.
I agree with all of what you said. I looked online to try to find the extension on his fastball because he is 6'8". Because I know that's a lot of what makes Logan Gilbert great, is he's got that great extension on the fastball, and when he throws 95, the perception of it is that it's 98 because he's able to reach so far in front of him, and when he releases the ball. I didn't find that information, but my assumption is that he does have great extension. In digging into Yuri Perez, what I found, in addition to what you said, what I found most interesting is that he's not walking many batters as a 19-year-old who's huge. So he has 9 walks in 34 innings for a 6.5% walk rate currently in AA. And if you think about the larger pitchers that threw with velocity, Randy Johnson, those sorts of folks, what they struggled with, the last skill that came along for them was control and command. And Perez reminds me of the new generation of NBA players who are, you have 6'10" wings who can handle like a point guard. And so you have all of the players on the court now are pretty big because they're all able to handle and shoot from the outside because they're much more coordinated than 6'10" players were 25 years ago. And I think Perez has that same coordination as a 6'8" pitcher. And so that allows him to repeat his delivery and have body control and in the same way that a 6'2" pitcher might. And so that's what's most encouraging for me. Of course, he's got the big fastball and the really great curveball and the plus change, but it's the ability to actually repeat that delivery and understand where he's throwing the pitch. Yeah. That's different than most, if not all, pitching prospects of his size and age. So very unique prospect to me. The Marlins are sneakily, one of the best organizations at developing pitching, always have been. And I'm super excited to see what comes of him. I wish that I would have dealt for him as you did, as early on as you did.
Yeah, I'm looking at his write-up on RotoWire, which is I do have quite a few subscriptions, but I can't subscribe to everything, and so I don't belong to Baseball America or any other like super deep prospect sites. But RotoWire is where I get a lot of my prospect study, and their write-up of him, they do note his excellent extension on his fastball. Mm-hmm. They also note that, and this is a big appeal to me, is he throws this fastball for strikes over 70% of the time. Mm-hmm. And as you point out, that command, that's to me the ability to locate it's one thing to have velocity and explosion with the fastball, but if you can command the fastball, to me, that's just an excellent foundation. Right. And you add his athleticism and makeup, it just to me is the makings a lower risk of a high risk. Right. I love having those things: a fastball, command, elite extension, great athlete, great makeup. I feel like if you're going to take a risk, those are some great things to have in place. Absolutely. On another podcast, let's table this, but on another podcast, I'd like to discuss makeup and how it's valued. I don't know that. I think we will have pretty strong extremes on one end and the other. I tend to not think about it much or care about it all that much when looking at player evaluation. But that'll be a fun, I think, debate to have down the road. My number four. So you gave 3, which was Yuri Perez. We're on 3. Right, but so I gave my 5, but it didn't give my 4 yet. Oh, I thought you did. Okay. My 4 is Kyle Harrison. Okay. Who we had talked about a little bit previously. Not because I rostered him. I rostered him because he was my number 4. Got it. 20 years old, 3rd round pick of the Giants in 2020. He dropped out of the 1st round because of perceived signability issues. 6'2", 200 pounds, not the biggest pitcher. When he was drafted, he was kind of a low 90s fastball, could touch mid 90s. Right when he began in Instructs, he was hitting 97, and now is consistently in the mid 90s, topping out at 98. Interesting thing about him is he throws from a little lower arm slot, and so he gets a ton of horizontal movement on his pitches. His slider currently is in the mid 80s. But what I really like about him too is that his slider gets enough, even though it's a little bit more horizontal, gets enough depth that it's a currently really effective pitch against right-handers as well. So that's my worry typically with left-handers, that our fastball slider is that if you don't get enough depth on the slider, it's a really easy pitch for a right-hander to identify and hit. Speaking of Randy Johnson, one of the things that was special about him was that his slider broke so late that it went from looking like a fastball to landing on the right-handed hitter's back toe. And then he's got a developing changeup as well that has really, really good movement. So while I'm nervous, when I typically get a little nervous about a left-hander with a lower arm slot, because right-handers typically can
can identify the pitch a little bit quicker because of the slot. As of right now, it looks like that's almost a plus because it's a little bit funky. So started the season in high A. He's now in double A. He's thrown 34 and 2/3 innings. He's 0-1 with a 1.82 ERA and a 1.04 WHIP. But the big number is in 34 and 2/3 innings, he's walked 11 and struck out 68 batters. So a lot of deception, difficult to see, fun pitcher. And again, to your point, he's a Giant. And I really believe in the Giants' ability to get the most out of their pitching talent. And they need young starting pitching to come up through the ranks because they've been getting by with the Cobbs and DeSclafanis and even Rodons of the world, and need to start developing a little bit more young pitching. So I'm super high on Kyle Harrison. I don't think he's at Yuri Perez's level, but I think he's probably a half notch below. I can see the two of them being consensus top 5 starting pitchers going into 2023. Who's your number, or do you have any comments on Harrison, or do you want to move to your number 2?
Why don't you give your 3? I don't have any comments on Harrison.
Okay, well, 3 was Perez for me.
Okay.
2 was Rodriguez. I think that in hindsight, I might consider Perez over Rodriguez in that I think he might have a little higher ceiling, and believe it or not. So I guess we'll move to 1. It sounds like we have the same number 1 minor league starting pitcher.
We don't. My number 2 is your number 1. So I know your number 1 is going to be Espino. I have Espino at 2. And I have Shane Baz at number 1.
And what is it? Or do you want to talk a little bit about Baz?
I mean, he just looks like the next Corbin Burns to me. From the cup of coffee he had last year, what he did last year in the minors, and then through the Olympics as well. I mean, obviously you can nick him for his health. He's has been banged up this year so far. And if he had pitched more in the majors, I wouldn't have put him on this list. But I don't think that he threw less than 20 innings last year, something like that. But he just looks electric. And again, the fact that he's on the Rays in that environment, in that pitcher's park, on that team, he looks like a dynamite fantasy asset. And he has that blend of like super high ceiling that a lot of the other guys have on this list, and also being on the cusp of the majors.
Right. Let me ask you this: is there a ceiling to Rays pitchers because of, in terms of innings and strikeouts, because of how they use them?
Early on in their career arc, I think there is, but I think what you will see, what they've done, what they've shown with Glass now, and now with McClanahan, is once they've built up and they've had that sustained workload, they do let them go deeper. I think because they handled Snell that way, so with such, I think, publicity, that reputation has kind of preceded itself to a point. Because again, if you look and see, they do have guys that they have allowed to work deeper into games. Once they have shown or built them up in a way where they're confident they can handle it from a physical standpoint.
Right.
They are one of the quicker teams to go to the bullpen for sure, and with a great intentionality and with great intelligence and matchups and things that they want to try to succeed, they will go to the pen. But I don't see them doing that at the cost of their premium starters, at least in the last couple of years.
Right. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and talk a little bit about Daniel Espino, and then move to open forum and open some PAX cards.
Great.
Is that all you got on Shane Baz? You want to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look at him and Espino, the reason I gave Baz the edge, in addition to proximity, it's the Baz, to me, when I look at his track record, it just has elite command. When I looked at Espino, who I also really like, and he was the subject of a video breakdown that we did in the off season. He has electric stuff. He had 150 strikeouts in 90 innings last year. but he also had an almost 9% walk rate, which isn't bad for someone with that kind of stuff. And for as young as he is, as you said, command is something that tends to come with maturity. But I just love Boz's elite command, to get that much swing and miss with elite command, I think is pretty unique, and is one of the reasons I valued Boz by a nose over Espino in the Guardian system. Yeah, I love Espino as well. I mean, he also has unlike Yuri has that height. Espino looks like a NFL running back. I mean, he's really broad-shouldered, really strong lower half. I really love the way he drives and uses his lower half. And that's one of the things I enjoyed about studying him in the offseason was just just watching him pitch. He just is very dynamic on the mound, and seems like his delivery seems very repeatable, and very much one that his body can sustain. He does not look like he's swung with supreme effort out there. So, and then being in the Guardian system obviously is a huge asset for him. But I'll let you speak to him since he's your number one.
He is my number one, and I left Boz out in part because we have that conversation about how we classify prospects. He obviously would, I would rank him certainly above Harrison and Job. The question that I asked about how Tampa uses their pitchers, I do believe that they limit, or they're super conscious of the wear and tear on their pitchers' arms, and probably more so than just about any other organization, and also play matchups in a little bit different manner. And so in my mind, I don't, this is just off the top of my head, but I don't remember a lot of 7-inning starts from Tampa Bay pitchers over the years, at least with the current regime. It may change as the number of relievers are reduced, and if we have a pitch clock and some of the other things that are brought into baseball, that remains to be seen. But I don't know that I can count on them allowing pitchers to go much past 5 or 6 innings, right? And I think some of the value in having good starting pitching in fantasy is, unless you're willing to carry 10 starters, is just getting those consistent innings over start. And that's why, for me, I value someone like a Zach Wheeler, right? Wheeler consistently is going 6 and 7 innings per start. Maybe not even at the same level of performance as a Tampa Bay Rays pitcher might, but he's going to give me more innings over the long haul. That's no knock on Boz's ability or pitches. I just think that they're more likely to look for those pitchers who are giving you dynamic performance over 5 or maybe over 6 than those that give you a little bit more, little less dynamic performance, but 7 or 8 innings, which is one of the reasons why I love Espino so much. Is, as you pointed out, he's 6'2", 225, and an incredibly powerful pitcher. Fangraphs graded his fastball as an 80 pitch, pipeline 80 potential, pipeline 70, and his slider is a 70 from Fangraphs and a 65 from pipeline. He does have a 4-pitch mix. His changing curveball are okay. So his fastball tops out at 101, but he's got 2 different sliders, as a lot of pitchers do. So he's got the really tight vertical break, high 80s, low 90s slider, but he also has a slider with a little more break that is take a couple miles per hour off of it. And I like that he is, although he throws 101, he is a pitcher already, right? He's an athletic pitcher, and he's coming from the Guardians organization, which, as you said, is really great at developing young pitching. So for me, you've got same organizational pedigree, a powerful pitcher with the repeatable delivery, a build that screams to me, workhorse, right? 6-7 inning workhorse. And so that difference in innings is what is the differentiator for me between Espino and some of the others. I think I can envision him throwing 200 plus innings for the Guardians soon. I don't know that I can envision any of the other pitchers on this list throwing 200 innings in a season. That's just, to me, that's the differentiator, and an extra 20, 30 innings from a starting pitcher in fantasy is, to me, worth being at the top of this list. Do you have anything else to share with the starting pitchers?
I don't. I think it'd be interesting to do a study and see like how many 200 inning pitchers has Cleveland had traditionally. Because certainly he may have that. I think he is, as I said, like watching him throw and his motion on the mound seems like one that will keep him healthy over the long haul. But looking just his progression, he's thrown 13 innings, 10 innings, 49 innings, 42 innings. He's at 18 this year, and he is on the injured list with a knee. So yes, I think down the road he might be a 200 inning pitcher, but I think even if he was in the majors this time next year, the Guardians would want to build him up, I would think, to that sort of work. But he just for sure has that ceiling in him,
right,
based on the motion and his repertoire. And yeah, we should see, does Cleveland traditionally have that?
Right. I also think that they're a little bit more malleable in their approach from pitcher to pitcher.
Yeah.
And that's something that I tend to value quite a bit, is understanding what each pitcher can give and not trying to, we talked about it with the Pirates and their old approach of trying to get every pitcher to be two-seam fastball and slider. And I think the Indians, you have a handful of like all sorts of different starters in their organization. Gavin Williams is one type, and Shane Bieber is, a soft tosser, right? You've got Tristan McKenzie, who is a vertical pitcher who doesn't throw that hard, but changes eye level. Like, you've got all these different types of arms within the organization. To me, that means they're flexible in what they're willing to do. It doesn't mean it's better necessarily, but that's something that I look for. But yeah, I think all of these pitchers on this list are pitchers that I would love to roster if I had the space and the ability to acquire. And Harrison is my guy on this list, and Yuri Perez is your guy. So it's going to be fun to follow these guys and see how they come out.
For sure.
Super fun exercise for me to go through. I did a little write-up of each of them and their fan graphs and pipeline projections, and I'll post this on the blog. But a fun exercise for sure.